Today, we'll be discussing the booming and the pruning time in child's upbringing. This concept is strange to many parents. Yes, I know, but it is the greatest parenting secret in the world. However, it has been kept from many parents. The booming and the pruning happen in children between the ages of 1 to 11 years. They are critical events that, if enhanced, can positively impact the child. But if neglected, it also impacts the child negatively. For a better understanding of this subject, let's consider the booming and the pruning time separately. Now, what is the booming time of life? The first 3 years of a child are referred to as the booming time of life. It is the time when the child's brain naturally produces billions and billions of what is called synapses. According to research, the brain produces about 700 to 1,000 synapses per second during these first 3 years of birth. This rapid and spontaneous production of synapses the brain experiences begins as a result of the child's first interaction with the outside world after birth. Note, synapses are the most important things that interconnect the brain and aid its functions. But this synapses production stops when the child is 3 years old. Interestingly, at 3 years, the child's brain has twice as many synapses as it will have in an adult. This is what makes children, or why children are more intelligent, smart, and creative than adults, including their parents. Are you surprised? Yes, it is true. Children are more intelligent, are more smart, are more creative than adults. Also, these billions of synapses produced gives the child the ability to learn more than 3 languages at the same time. This is the capacity the synapses produce within the first 3 years gives a child. Before we get into much details, let's see why synapses are the most important factor in the human development cycle. 1. Synapses aid the most important function of the brain, which are learning, memory, remembering, imagination, or cognitive abilities. 2. Synapses are the secret behind the 3 cycles of human development, which are the intellectual development, the social development, and the cognitive development. Please note that synapses and neurons form the structuring of the brain. The brain processes information by a network of neurons which communicate with one another using electrical and chemical signals. But the connection between one neuron to another is done by synapses. Let me explain that in a layman's term. It is synapses that connect the brain together. Let's see an example. If you have about 15 inverter batteries and only 2 are connected, the amount of voltage you will have will be low. This is the same situation when it comes to synapses. Someone can have the exact number of brain cells, but if only 10% are connected, the brain will underperform. What helps us to connect our brain cells and neurons together and get maximum output is synapses. This is how important it is. When the brain has or produces more synapses, it becomes more interconnected and more responsive when it comes to performance. Note, synapses are the core factor that promotes learning, memory, and cognitive or imaginative process. In a nutshell, it aids the smooth learning, remembering, memory, and imaginative process of the brain. The abundance of synapses, twice that of an adult brain, available to the child from 1 year to 10 years, make it easier for a child to undergo intellectual, social, and cognitive development. These 3 to 10 years of rapid brain development must be leveraged before 11 years of birth, when another unfavorable and compulsory process called pruning occurs. Brain pruning is a process that occurs at 11 years of age, where all the synapses that are not used are eliminated to keep the brain fit. It is like discharging extra luggages you are not using to economize space. After 10 years, the brain only keeps the synapses in the brain that are actively engaged. Pruning itself is not a bad brain exercise per se, but it is the over-pruning that is the problem. Let's see a situation that makes it bad. However, it is caused by the ignorance of parents. This is usually why parenting education is recommended before conception and childbirth. When the synapses produced in the brain within the first 3 years are not adequately or actively engaged, pruning can be a disadvantage. What causes the inadequate engagement of synapses produced in the first 3 years and available in the first 10 years is the parental focus on the intellectual or academic development of the child, while the social and the cognitive aspects are left to develop by default. This is usually the case. In Nigeria, for instance, the trend is to enroll a child in daycare once the child is about 2 years or less. From there, we move them to crèche, kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, and for the first 10 to 25 years of their life, they are occupied with academic work or intellectual development. Note, the intellectual development, which is the academic of the child, is not enough to engage the billions and billions of synapses available then in the brain. It is one out of the 3 cycles of development. So, when the brain prunes at 11, all the unused synapses, which were supposed to aid the social and the cognitive development, are pruned. Please understand that when this over-pruning exercise occurs, these 3 cycles of development and brain performance are seriously affected and reduced. You say, how do I mean? 1, the rapid intellectual and social and cognitive development are reduced, since synapses are the factors that sustain their development. 2, the rapid learning, memory, and imaginative abilities are also reduced, since it aids their individual functions in the brain. Over-pruning is the worst thing that can happen to a child and must be prevented at all costs. A child whose parents allow their brain to prune without adequately engaging them should be pitied, because the human development capacity and brain ability can be reduced to less than 33.2% after. The affected child also are usually below average or at most average. When this is coupled with something like dyslexia or attention deficit syndrome challenge, the child can end up indolent. I had 2 of such cases after delivering a lecture on how to build a retentive memory and increase academic performance in a school. One student said, I used to be the best mathematical student in my class when I was younger, but today I can't solve a simple mathematics. The other said, I used to be very intelligent when I was growing up, But today, I have no trace of such intelligence. These and more are the situation many of our children are facing right now. All this happened because the billions of synapses that enabled and aided them in this height of academic excellence were prone. This is actually one of the causes of poor reading culture, the inability to comprehend, assimilate, and remember among children, aside attention deficit syndrome and dyslexia. This also has been found to be the problem of the third world nations' citizens. The fact still remains that you cannot engage a child's billions of brain cells and billions of brain neurons without synapses. They are the only thing that interconnects the brain components and aid its functionality. Engaging the synapses the brain naturally produces from the first to the third year can never be overemphasized. There is no two ways about this. It is the way forward for every child. Let's talk about pruning and the teenage years. I seriously believe that overpruning plays a role in the challenges our teenagers are struggling with. Parents usually complain about the decline in everything once their child gets into the teenage years. Oftentimes, they try to adopt other measures to help, but not realizing that pruning has occurred. Overpruning is the greatest struggle or the enemy of the teenage years. Remember, it occurs at 11, the particular time the child is stepping into the teenage years. Imagine when the overpruning challenges are now combined with the puberty challenges that happen during the teenage years. This kind of situation can create an internal conflict that can be so much for a child to handle. This is where most parents lose their child. At this point, you cannot help if you don't have parenting education. I know the teenage years have their own challenges, but the number one causes of their frustration and their inadequacy is as a result of these two reasons that reduces the brain capacity and affects the human development cycle. Reason number one is when the synapses that sustain the rapid intellectual, social, and cognitive development have been pruned. Reason number two is when the synapses that aid the rapid and the individual function of learning, memory, imaginative abilities in the brain have been pruned. This inability to perform as usual creates depression, frustration, confusion, sadness, self-doubt, internal struggle, and a feeling of inadequacy. This is where the experimentation syndrome that leads them into destructive habits begin. Note, the first way to prepare your child for the teenage years is to avoid overpruning of the brain. In the next episode, I will show you the measures to stop the brain of our children from overpruning at 11 years and how to maximize the billions of synapses produced. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.